Well, hello there. Kumusta po kayo? How are you? And thank you for tuning in to another edition of Paul the Guzman Presents Art. Also, I just want to wish you a happy Chinese New Year. And appropriately, we're in the Vancouver Chinatown area that's been built over the ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. So we're just about to go inside the gallery. You see that little thing that points over there? It's the Access Gallery here in Chinatown. And we're going to go and have a look at the beautiful work by Damla Tamer, who is a Turkish Canadian artist living here in Vancouver. But don't be fooled. I'm going to be discussing the work a little bit more in depth later on. So I hope you enjoy this tour, and I hope you stay with me for the rest of the entire episode. So here we go. Okay, so we're just going to go inside the gallery and have a look. All right? I know they encourage you to actually wear masks because the thing about it is that COVID is still with us. So it's always a good precautionary measure. And you can see over here, we have a little bit of a paraphernalia with the masks and the antibacterial hand sanitizer. So we're gonna pan through the gallery, and I just want to mention this little tear sheet over here that I'm trying to focus on. It's a write-up of about the show, because the show currently has two documents. I'm not sure if I can actually put the entire document in the description area. One of them will be there because YouTube limits me to 5,000 characters. But this entire show is by Turkish Canadian artist Damla Tamer, or Tamer. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. And it's a very sort of like beautiful show, but it's also kind of laden with a lot of political sort of like goings on in Turkey in the last 10 years. And that little tear sheet that I showed you was actually it was written by, her name is, let's see, Begüm Özden Fırat. And she was actually unable to visit the gallery because she lives in Istanbul. She's a professor in Istanbul. And so she was able to sort of like write about, not really about the show, but really more about the politics behind the show, especially Turkish politics in the last 10 or 12 years. And then there's another write-up by the curator. Her name is Katie Belcher. And she used to be the director curator of Access Gallery. Now she is an independent curator. And this is her first independent foray into curating. And let's see now, I spoke with Katie about a week ago, and she mentioned to me that she wanted to sort of deal more with the essence and the parallels of drawing in terms of Damla Tamer's production for this show. So the show, here, let me just have a look. The show is titled Pepper Garden. I'm not sure how to pronounce the Turkish word for it, Biber Bahçesi or something like that. It's on till about March 23rd. I will have all that information in the description area, but I want us to actually go quite slowly with all of the works here, because they're also quite beautiful works, but at the same time, like I said before, there were certain sort of like underpinnings of politics regarding the entire essence of the show. So to begin with, a lot of the works are actually on paper. And some of the papers are actually pulped papers. And let me just explain what that means. You see, when Damla was actually making the work, she had gone through a couple of copies, paper copies of the, the Istanbul Convention, which was authored around 2011. And also the 2021 presidential decree that made Turkey sort of like get out of that convention that they signed initially. And what exactly is the Istanbul Convention? So in 2011, the Council of Europe had met in Istanbul and created protections for women for all of the European Union countries. And it's basically a protection against domestic violence for women. And it was signed by Turkey. It is the Istanbul Convention. And so what happened, though, is that when the current president of the Republic of Turkey, which is Recep Tayyip Erdogan, when he was, just before he was reelected, I think, they had decided to actually sort of get out of that treaty through a presidential decree. And so that means at this moment in time, since 2021, there is no decree protecting women against domestic violence in Turkey. So the artist took paper copies of both of those declarations, and in some way, she kind of like, in true sort of like paper making fashion, she pulped them, probably using a blender and some liquid or something like that. And then she used transparent, what you're looking at right now is like, she used transparent thread. She kind of like wove it in this type of pattern, and then she sort of like immersed it in this pulped sort of like declaration papers. And this particular piece over here, which is quite a large piece, it's one of the larger pieces in the show, but there are smaller pieces where the paper is actually much more opaque. And we're gonna go and have a look at some of those right now. Like for example, these papers that we're looking at right now have been imbued with also like red thread. And I guess it kind of, for me, from my point of view, they tend to sort of like, perhaps like streams of blood can be represented by them. I don't wanna put anything as, that's just a theory on my part, because I'm looking at these, because the thing about the works is that you can look at them as a result of political tensions or political realities in Turkey, or you can look at them aesthetically and try and sort of like determine what aesthetics and politics and how they mesh together pretty much in terms of the work in the show. Because one of the essays that the writer from Turkey had mentioned that she had looked at this entire show as if it was like a digestive system. And in true form, it's kind of like one of those things where you're trying to sort of like ingest and regurgitate certain aspects of Turkish society, especially current Turkish society, and the edicts that actually formed that government, and trying to sort of like come to terms with what that means with certain populations in Turkey, especially women and women's rights, because a lot of rights within the Turkish Republic are kind of like being eroded, because you can't help but forget the fact that it's an Islamic country. So there are certain sort of like fundamental ways that Islam is actually practiced, and women's rights and gay rights are not really on the top of the agenda. And I think it's actually gay rights movement that was kind of being blamed for the apparent presidential decree that made them sort of like get out of the Istanbul Convention. I read it somewhere. It's kind of like vague in my mind right now. But the thing about it is, I'm not an expert at Turkish. I'm Filipino, so my knowledge of Turkish politics is actually quite limited. But the one thing that's really wonderful about this show is that it makes you think about the underlying sort of like aspects of a person's artistic practice, where it's coming from, how is it being informed, and the entire essence of how the works are created become really significant. like if you were to take copies of, let's say, the Constitution of Canada, and you're a First Nations artist, and then you it's like, yeah, and then you pulp it, and then you sort of like create work from it that kind of like deals with residential schools, that becomes really poignant. And it reverberates in many different layers within the work. And the same thing for this work by Damla Tamer is that there's this underlying sort of like foundation of politics or political sort of like manifestation that can go and bubble up to the surface. And then now you can sort of like look at these images of red thread, and you can sort of like reinterpret them in a manner that's fitting the foundation of the works. That's what I think, anyways. Well, what do I know? But the thing about it is that there's also these sort of like sense of when you look at the threads, there's like loops of threads, and they almost look like geographic markers to me. And then when you look at a piece like, for example, this piece, which is more like a grid pattern, it almost looks like a topographical, geographic sort of like cityscape. And then you look at pieces like this one, for example, which has a lot of like really beautiful sort of, I think maybe these are pepper trees. And the entire show is called Pepper Garden. And after reading the text, it's kind of interesting to note the significance of the pepper. Apparently, when a woman wears some sort of piece of clothing that depicts the pepper, whether it's a shawl or whether it's something sort of like something that's kind of like an accessory, it kind of indicates that there is some sort of problem happening domestically. And it's a way for people to sort of like read what's going on in their respective households without having to ask. So it's almost like a secret code, which I found very interesting because like Pepper Garden, now that you sort of like look at these works, you're kind of like thinking, what a beautiful installation, and then not realizing that the significance of the pepper has really more to do with maybe a notion of domestic violence when it comes to women. And the one thing that I also like about this entire show, there's a lot of natural elements in the show. Like, for example, these are, I think, dried up dandelions that the artist and her son collected over a period of time and dried. And I think the most beautiful piece in the show is actually a sculptural piece, which is this piece over here, which to me kind of mimics like a bladder or a stomach, which tends to sort of like reinforce the entire essence of digestion, regurgitation, and sort of trying to figure out what happens when we internalize certain aspects of our society, of our life, and make it visible. This is also made of thread and dried up dandelions, and there's also some pieces of text. No doubt they're probably from either the Istanbul Convention or maybe the presidential decree. Let's see now, there's some red threads which are actually sort of like a very, which runs through a lot of the artworks. There's a lot of red thread going through. And there's also that transparent sort of like thread that we can see over there. Although it almost looks gold in this light. So I'm just gonna go and pan one last time. I'm trying to figure out which one is the piece that I really, really like. And I think it's this one because I think it's quite iconic that the entire show is called Pepper Garden. And hopefully you like this video. There's going to be a lot of things to read about this show. It's on until March 23rd. And if you check their website, the information is down in the description area. There's also a bunch of things that are happening with regard to the show, like talks, and I think the very last day of the show, there's going to be some sort of like guided tour. I'm not sure, but I will put a link to the website down in the description area as well. So I hope you like this video. You can like it. You can also share this video on your social media, and also consider subscribing to the channel. They're all free and they're here for you to enjoy. And let's see now, is there anything else that I need to talk about? So I'm going to try and put some of the text in the description area because like I said earlier, YouTube can only give me maximum of 5,000 characters. So hopefully I can actually go and put one of those essays in there. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have a great day. I hope art informs your life, and I am out of here. Goodbye.